In this episode, we discuss meaningful speculation using the surfaces of ignorance. Welcome to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon Ray, and we're joined by our co-host, visual designer Oyani Onemiya. How you doing, Oyani?
I'm doing okay, Shan. What's up, man? How's the weekend?
The weekend? Oh, I'm excited. This weekend is Israel Adesanya's fight. Fighting. What's his name? God, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. Robert Whitaker.
Yeah. I think this is the second fight or the first fight?
I asked the second fight. We watched the first fight together.
First fight together. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Tom.
I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure he'll win.
We'll see. Can't. I don't know. I'm actually curious. I think honestly, I'm leaning toward him, but you never know. It's hard to predict these things. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think Israel has had quite a bit of time to get ready for this one. So I don't know that he's not ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you fought him before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Bobby Knuckles has improved some. So like he's actually been Robert Whitaker's been looking great in his last couple fights. Mm-hmm. It just comes down like one thing that I think is going to be crucial, mm-hmm. and Israel's pretty smart, so he'll probably be able to adapt in the fight. But one thing that he does, especially when he fought Robert Whitaker the first time, is he leans back.
Yeah,
like he leans back to like avoid strikes. And if Robert Whitaker kicks his legs or goes to the body, and this is something the Weasel, this is a MMA analyst guy that I watch on YouTube. He's actually really popular, but I think he makes up a good point that that it could be a good idea just to go to his body or go for his legs and like try to get him to like lean back to counter. Yeah. But I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. It shouldn't be too bad. I think it'll be a great fight regardless. Of course, I'm rooting for Israel as always.
Yeah, of course, obviously, yeah. But actually, one thing that I was thinking about in terms of MMA is the idea of trying to predict who will win a fight, and then think of all the characteristics and attributes you could use to be like, I think this person will win, or I think that person will win. And in the last episode, we were talking about modeling spirits, and we were talking about, giving some constraint data, which then identifies a group of people, and then using the average behavior of those people to then create like a model of the spirit of that constraint data. So, for example, in like the last episode, I was talking about Iranians, and I know some Iranians, and so if I wanted to capture the spirit of the people of Iran, then I would want to take everyone who qualifies under the constraint data of Iranian, and then I would want to like average together their characteristics, and then like give that average data, like the spirit, and then try to define what the spirit of an Iranian is. Yeah, so then you have this model of what an Iranian is, and when you meet an Iranian, you try to use that model to predict how they respond to this, and that's kind of like what it is to like cultures and customs. Like, we want to learn about people's cultures and customs. You want to like, if I do this certain thing, that will be offensive. They'll react this way. Yep. Yeah. But I was trying to use this in terms of predicting fights. Like, imagine if someone wanted to predict, who would win two fighters, and they're only using something like their race. So say you're like, okay, I'm going to try to use someone's race as a predictor for whether or not they'll win a fight.
Like as to how I place my bets, for example.
How I place my bets, yeah. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to assume that every single time a black person fights, that they're going to win the fight. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be what you use to predict. Now, the thing is if that spirit, like the spirit of a black person, if that has no correlation to fighting, whether or not they win a fight, then you will win basically at a random. Randomly, because that data of someone's race actually has no predictive power on whether or not they'll win a fight. And so trying to use, so that's basically like when you're looking at certain traits of a group, you can see whether or not the constraint data of someone's race actually has any predictive power, depending on what scenario you're trying to use. You're trying to use that data for to make a prediction.
It's almost like imagining if you were trying to make a prediction between who was going to win a boxing match between Floyd Mayweather and Simone Biles.
Okay.
So, think about this for a second. Like, we know what the spirit of a boxer is, and we know who embodies that spirit. So you could take a bet off of that. Exactly. You could take a bet off of that. Like, you know what? Okay, this is what embodies the spirit of a. If you look at Simone Biles and say, you know what, she embodies the spirit of a boxer, and take your bet off of that, you don't even know what game you're playing at that point.
Well, you don't. You've miscategorized her. Like, you're not basing it. But it's funny though, because like, if you're trying to make a bet about who would win a fight, you'd want to, like, there are certain things that you could know about fighting that you could use as better predictors. Like, does this person have the spirit? Does this have as opposed to race? Like, does this person have the spirit of a big puncher? Like, this person has the spirit of having a lot of power. Whenever they land, whenever they land, they tend to knock people out, and that's part of their fighting spirit. And then you can use that data to make a prediction, and that will be like better off at being able to actually make an effective prediction. And it's funny because, in terms of like the race of people or their country of origin, there is actually one group based off of where they're from. I'm serious. Like, based from where they're from, that you can just predict. I'm going to just bet every single time that person from that group is going to win, and that is people from Dagestan. Everyone who watches MMA knows that people from Dagestan are a motherfucker to fight, man. These people.
But does it have anything to do with where they're from, or just the way of life there?
It's both of those things. Okay. It just so happens that just happens to be a group of people who live in the Caucasus area, like in Russia. So it's a place that has been war-torn for centuries. Essentially. Okay. These people, all they know are fighting. So when you hear about their upbringing, what they do, and like what's valued there, and like how hard it is to grow up in Dagestan, you're like, yeah, that condition makes sense.
It makes sense how this will create a fighting spirit.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And not only that, but a lot of these Dagestani fighters, they grow up in traditions to where, like, once they're like 4 or 5, they're expected to fight in the street. They go to gyms and they're just trained in all martial arts from like 4. And so if someone's from Dagestan and you want to bet your money on whether or not they're going to win a fight, you just go, that person's from Dagestan, put my money on that person. Yeah, because that spirit actually has predictive power.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. I like it.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So I don't know. I was just thinking about that and start off the episode with that. Basically, we want to kind of, I feel like, as you say, we left some meat on the bone from the discussion from last
time. Okay.
Yeah.
We had an interesting conversation about Gordan Ramsey. And
yeah.
I was watching him on, he has this new show on Hulu. You might actually like it.
Oh, we watched it.
How do you know what show I'm talking about?
The level one. The one with the
yeah, that's the one. That's
it. Nah, Eunice and I already, we're up to date. The thing is, that dude has so many shows. There are still a bunch of them that we haven't seen, but usually the competition ones, we always watch
really
those.
Good. Yeah. He has shows on Discovery now, and shows where he goes and explores cultures and things like that. But that show is pretty interesting, though, because you can kind of see him try to, like, manage... Because traditionally, he's always on the judging end of things.
Yeah.
Completely on the judging end of things. But now you can kind of see how he's trying not to lose as well.
Yes. Yeah. I was pointing that out to Eunice. It's a double game.
Yeah.
I love it, man. One thing about Gordan Ramsey that I love is the reality he creates. Like, think about it. Mm-hmm. All of these games are centered around this guy. Mm-hmm. And when I'm watching him, like, in these shows... Just think that he has been enthusiastically setting up these games and inviting random normal people to come play games. He's basically saying, come play with me. Yeah. Who wants to play in my world? These are the constraints that I create. This is my world. Come play my games. And this dude has been enthusiastically playing these games for like 20 some odd years. Yeah. He has to be doing something that is just like the core of his being. Like, as a chef, this dude has spread the spirit of culinary arts like no other. Like, you can tell that, like, his god being, like, one of his gods being, like, the spirit of cooking and being a chef. He has spread that thing, and because of it, I think more people aspire to be chefs are good at cooking than ever before.
Yep, he's influenced a lot of people, because I remember when the pandemic had started, you will go on his Instagram feed and people will cook stuff and he'll comment on it, they'll tag him on it and he'll comment on it like, oh, why didn't you do this? Or they will make a video of how they're making like beef Wellington or one of his famous dishes, and he will kind of like make his typical critique of it, like, oh, that's too much grease, what are you doing, you're gonna burn it, things like that. And like you said, it's so obvious that there's a certain kind of spirit that he's trying to like spread. There's a certain idea that you can tell when you see him. And like you said, we only know so much about him based off of what we see on TV for the hour-long show or the 30-minute-long show, whatever. But,
The thing is for one, it seems as though his life seems to be centered around mentoring people to be chefs, to cook. And if you look at the first season of something like Hell's Kitchen, and you look at the first season, and then you look at the show progress, or even from like MasterChef, you look at these shows, and you can just see the quality of the competitors just keeps going up every year. And I think that's because he created these games. And not only has he created these games, but he has influenced other people to create similar games. And then not only does he mentor the competitors, but then he brings people into the show like other chefs, and he exposes them to people like me and Eunice and other people. And so now those people, they go around and they influence, and they basically get the rub from him. And one thing that I've noticed about this dude, like, we have limited of information about him, but it's consistent. Like every time you look at, like, he has like Aaron Sanchez or something like that, that dude looks like a very passionate dude about cooking. And the people that surround him, they all seem like good people. You look at the people on the shows, and like they're competing in these games, they'll make food for him and he'll tell them it's delicious or something, and you can just see them crying on the show. And like everything seems to be consistent. Like there's a consistent spirit that every time I sample data correlated to Gordan Ramsey, it's always this positive data.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's value in appreciating that, even if, we don't know everything going on in his life, but like we kind of talk about gauge freedom. Yeah. It's a great place to be. It's a great perspective to have about his art and what he puts out.
Yeah. And Eunice and I went to a couple of his restaurants. So it's always the possibility that everything about who he is bullshit. Yeah. There's always a possibility of that. Like when you're watching these shows, for a fact that they're editing and they're cutting out, and they get to select what they present to you. So there's a degree of control that he has, and the people who create that show have, to curate a specific version of his reality that they want us to see. And so you always have to ask yourself, are they manipulating me to believe he's a good person? Or is he a genuinely good person? Or is there like some gray areas? Like we always have a limited amount of data to assess this person's spirit. And one thing I was saying before is that if he's supposed to be like this great chef, if you go to one of his restaurants, you're gonna expect the food to be amazing. We went to 2 of his restaurants in Vegas. Like we went to Vegas for Christmas once, and both of the restaurants were amazing. The beef Wellington was phenomenal. We went to a place, got a steak in the bread pudding. It was phenomenal. It's like, yeah. This is like giving my model of this dude. This is confirming the model you have. Yes. Okay. There's something real here. Yeah. I made a prediction on what I expect to experience going to one of his restaurants, given the image they've curated of him, and it completely delivered on anything you'd expect. Like this is like, if it was trash, I'd be like, that's interesting. This dude's supposed to have all these Michelin star restaurants, and yet this restaurant is terrible. That would be shocking.
I watched that show, Next Level Chef or whatever it's called, and it's a pretty great show.
Next Level Chef,
yeah. And I only just found out he actually put the show together, like it was his idea and everything. Yeah, so you can kind of tell that a chef put that together too. Like it wasn't a studio exec who put it together, and it was someone who understands games.
And someone who understands games. Yes. I was going to say, at this point, this dude isn't just a chef; he is a restaurateur a TV personality. Like you could just say like he's just as much a host of TV shows. Like that spirit is probably on par, if not the same level of his chef spirit at this point. And yeah, the thing is given all of these, like how enthusiastic and how big of a fan I am of this dude, there's always someone who could sit back like, they got you. You know, it's all manipulation. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all fake. And the thing is like I was saying, there's always a possibility that all of this is not real. Yeah. That's always a possibility. But I will never have that full information about that. You know, as a person sitting out on the sidelines, just
there's
looking
only so
around.
Much you would know about it.
There's only so much, and so I have a freedom. Like, do I want to go the cynical route and just like any person who tries to present themselves as a hero or as an ideal or as a model, it's all just fake. You know, I could choose that as my gauge freedom. I can choose to just be cynical and never like choose to, glob on. But I also have the freedom to be like, all right, based off of all the data I have, this seems to be consistent with this dude's spirit, and he spreads so much positivity. I'm just going to choose to, admire this person and then look at what he does and then use his data to model my own spirit and to try to improve my own life and like look at what is it he's trying to communicate and just try to take it in sincerely, just to be sincere. Assume he's being sincere. I have the freedom to choose he's being sincere.
Yeah, I had to work through that with what's his name as well, Garyvee, which is another interesting individual in the internet space, I guess. And for the longest time, I started following him, and I was like really liking some of the things that he would post, and it's just like stuff that we talk about all the time, stuff about how you have to just work hard to get what you want. Like he puts out words of like confidence and upliftment and things like that. Very positive guy, encouragement. But after like a couple of months, I started to get into this place where it's like, there's always this. But then I had to like walk myself back and go like every single time I see this dude interact with people in the wild or a video of him or something, he's always trying to put out positivity. This could be completely different behind the scenes, but I have to choose to see this.
Yes, you have to choose to see it that way. Because whether or not you choose to go the cynical route or you choose to go the sincere route and just try to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, I can guarantee they're not as positive as they project all the time. Like they have to have some demons. Like no one's perfect. But at the same time, that's true about everybody. So that doesn't put them in a new boat. And also, I would have to argue that someone who spends that much effort to curate that image of positivity, it's like, think of all the things they could choose to curate, like all the things they could choose to project.
You can't be faking that shit that hard.
Well, you could be, but it's like you have to think of it this way. It's always about being on the surface of ignorance because these are all speculation. Like he could be faking it, he could not be faking it. I don't have the data to say one way or the other, so I have this freedom to kind of, choose how I want to see it. And so, but the thing is, it's like, let's assume that he is faking it. It's all fake. But still look at the effect of that choosing to curate that on the world. That alone is positive because he could choose to project anything. So it's like even then, assuming that it's all fake, I still think there's a good reason to just
putting that out there.
To give him the credit, give these people the credit who choose to do that because they're still projecting so much positivity into the world. Even if it's all cynical, it's still an extreme amount of positivity.
Because I was feeling some type of way about his NFT project when he put that out. It just seemed like, okay, you're just trying to jump on this bandwagon of NFT and
you talk about Garyvee?
Garyvee, yeah. But over time, I'm like, you know what? Even with this thing you put out, you're still trying to be positive about it. Because the NFTs are things like Curiosity Cat, Positivity Possum, or something. It's like, you know what? Do your thing.
And he's pretty honest. He'll say stuff like, I'm trying to be positive and stuff, but I'm a capitalist. I'm trying to win and I'm trying to make money. Like he's pretty honest about that, And it's like there's a lot of ways to make money. It's like, all right, you're choosing to make money in a way that also spreads positivity. It's like, all right, I'm cool with that.
I'll take it. Yeah, yep. And that was exactly what I had to like work through in my head to get there. So now when I see his videos and his posts, I appreciate them kind of like.
I mean, I can just imagine what it would be like to move through the world always cynical.
Yeah.
And every time there is someone spreading positivity, you just always choose the cynical route to interpret what they're doing. Oh, they're just doing this for money. Oh, they're just doing this to curate this thing. Oh, they're just doing it for that. And if you're just moving through the world always fixing
it will
engaged,
color your worldview, man.
It's like how. Ooh. That just sounds like you're just creating a hell. Like you're just choosing to interpret everything in the most negative way, and there's nothing that says you have to fix the gauge that way. There's nothing that says that in the space of all possibilities, because you never have full information about these people. There's nothing that says that you always have to choose the cynical route. And the thing is, like, look, if tomorrow I found out that Gordan Ramsey is actually is sexually harassing all of his contestants. He actually beats his wife, and he, all this stuff. Like, find out all these things about him. It's not like I'm not going to change my data. Like, I'm gonna be like,
my world is not going to come crashing down.
Well, no, I mean, what I'm saying is that it's not as though I'm like Gordan Ramsey's an angel and he could never be a bad person. It's like if I get new data that says the cynical interpretation is the correct interpretation, I'm going to that data. Yeah. That's the data. That's what it says. And so I'm not like fixed on this, but before I get any such data, I'm not going to just choose to be cynical. I don't have the energy, and I can't afford to be cynical. I can't afford. It's going to tear me down. I need inspiration. I need inspiration to get through the world. Like,
it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work to maintain that level of cynicism about someone or a topic, or just go through your day-to-day life with that worldview. It's almost like you have to. It's almost like you remember this visual in cartoons from back in the day where you scare a cat and then they stand really tall on their feet with their hair stand up. I feel when you're cynical and going through work, you're walking around that way. That's a great image. It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a great image to think that, that's how you're walking around, like that cat with a head.
Just stressed out.
Is he trying to get me? Is he done?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. And for sure, it's something I always have to remind myself about too, because my default, coming from Nigeria, of course, is cynicism, Yeah. It's something you have to work on to give people a little bit of grace and things like that. So.
And so I don't know if we made this clear, but this whole discussion about Gordan Ramsey or just celebrities in general and the images they curate, and it's not even just celebrities, it's anything.
Anybody.
What is the spirit of anything? Everything creates art. And from that art, you can observe what it creates. And from that, you can create a model of their spirit. And so when it comes to anything that you sample its data, there's a certain level of, like, for instance, if I take someone like John Jones, for example, I don't know how much you know about John Jones, Oyani, but
I know a lot about John Jones.
Like, this dude, the data that you get from this guy, and I'm not talking about I'm not talking about following his entire life. I'm talking about, I always think of it as I pop my head up. So when it comes to a lot of things in the world, it's like I pop my head up, and then suddenly I see the data, and it's like, I'm not looking at it in detail. I just pop my head up, and this is what I saw. With John Jones, every time you pop your head up, and
the MMA John Jones guys, by the way.
Yeah. Like every time you pop your head up, it's always some disaster data.
It is just
it's some disaster data. And so it's like it's like if you create a spirit, if your version of this dude's spirit is a negative one, it's like, okay, you may not have full information to know, but just from popping my head up and sampling his data, it's like I feel like the conclusion I've drawn about his spirit is probably pretty decent, because whenever I pop my head up and look at Gordan Ramsey, it's always positivity. The people he surrounds himself with is positive. The food he makes seems to be positive.
The kind of art he puts out,
the art he puts out
about him, absolutely.
It's always positive, and so it's like, I don't know. It's you're always going through the world making judgments about everything with partial data, basically, and so there's always the space of speculation, which is the surface of ignorance of all the things that are consistent with the data you've gathered so far, and how you choose to put the probability of what's most likely to be true in the background. Like, in the background, I think the probability that Gordan Ramsey is actually a pretty decent person, I think the probability that's quite high. That's how I've chosen to put my distribution on the surface of ignorance of all the possibilities. That's how I've chosen to fix the gauge. And I'm going to move through the world with that data, because if you look at this children stuff, it always seems as though he's trying to encourage you to face your demons.
Push yourself,
bounce back,
be more creative,
push yourself, and become a better
defeat.
person.
All of that stuff is in there.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of which, I was watching that Next Level show the other day, and so the way the show works is they have 3 different kitchens: a bottom level, a mid level, and a high level. Almost like an ascension into heaven, almost is kind of what it's like, right? And so, no, seriously, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if this was intentional, because I was watching
to heaven or to the top of the game. I don't know about heaven, but
we can discuss. I mean, we can discuss the details of what that means. But anyway, the whole point is that I was watching some of the episodes the other day, and further along in the show, they have it to where the people are competing to be on which level. And so if you performed not great and you almost got kicked off the show, you didn't do bad enough to get kicked off, but you didn't do well enough to be in the higher level. And so every single time somebody is put into the lower level, their response is like, well, if this is where I am right now, I'm going to work my way up so I can get up to that higher level. And so it's like the show was curated to make people think that way. You're on the bottom, but with hard work, you'll get to the other level. It's like, that is Gordon Ramsay's spirit in a nutshell.
It's so much of those type of things. Yeah, it's so much of those type of things that's missing when we watch shows. Like, we don't notice that too much. But you're right. Yeah, that's exactly what he's trying to put out there.
Yeah, it's like something when you're watching it. It's like, why did they design this way? And then given the person who designed it and who's in the show, it's like his core message in a game, almost as explicit as possible. You are on the bottom. Things seem hard. Work really hard and work your way up to the top. That's it.
I really like the show. I got to watching it a couple of weeks ago, and it is something.
Yeah. But so switching topics a little bit. There was something that we mentioned in the last episode when we were talking about the fire example. Like you walk into a room and you see a fire in the corner, and you gathered some data, and then your mind creates a model of what's going on. Danger, get water, alert,
get help,
help, burning. Like, these are all the things that, like, your mind, destruction. Yes. Your mind it takes in that data and it maps to these concepts to try to get you to do something. And we mentioned that, imagine if every single time you went into a room and saw a fire, your mind mapped to something completely different. One time it maps to it's time to break dance. The other one it maps to
it's time to eat ice cream.
It's time to eat ice cream. Another one maps to, I need to do my homework. Every single time you walk in there, your mind just maps to something completely different. Now, that means that your language, your thing that takes in data and spits out an interpretation, it's broken. It doesn't actually create meaning, because it takes in the same thing and it produces
and gives it a different meaning every time.
It produces something random. It just makes random noise. This is a random noise generator. Like, that's what it is.
Generated.
And so it's obvious on something like fire. Like, this is a ridiculous example, but it becomes actually a serious example when you start thinking about someone's ethical positions and what it means to be a hypocrite. Because when it comes to your ethical predictions, like, for instance, in the episode, the finale, we had this example of someone saying that they have this ethical principle of all lives are sacred. Do you remember this?
Yep, I remember. And then we talked about the unborn baby and all that.
Yeah, so in the example, we had, like, imagine there was someone who says that all lives are sacred. And so they're saying that this is their ethical principles, like their ethical language. And so if I hand them a scenario and I want to know how their mind...
If you hand them any life, they're like, oh, this is sacred. Here's a life.
Well, no,
that's what you expect from them, essentially.
Yes. You expect them... They're saying to you that part of my language, my ethical language, is that if you give me a scenario about the sanctity of life, I will reply in a way that's consistent with the principle life is sacred. So, for example, capital punishment or the death sentence, right? If someone says all life is sacred, then you could imagine that when you ask them, do they support the death sentence, they'll say, no, all life is sacred. I do not support that. Or you ask them about abortion or something like that. They'll be like, no, all life is sacred,
okay.
you know? And so every time you give them something about whether or not we can destroy a life, their response will be no, all life is
That's
sacred.
what you should always get back if that's the position the person's taking. Yep.
Yes, but then, like we were saying in the finale, it was like, but what if it becomes conditional? It's like, well, all life is sacred unless you kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, oh, okay, so that means that all lives aren't necessarily sacred because there's this condition. And so you can almost think of that extra condition as being a deterioration of the principle all lives are sacred. And actually in quantum mechanics, this is an example of the difference between what we call pure states and mixed states. And so all life is sacred would be like a pure state. And then the idea that all lives are sacred unless that's like a mixed state. But in the example of the finale, what if it was like all lives are sacred unless you kill someone? All lives are sacred unless you steal from me.
You're deteriorating it over and over as you go.
Deteriorating it over and over again to the point now to where if someone says one of my principles are all life is sacred unless it's all of these things, if I tried to feed in data about like what they will say about abortion or what they'll say about the death penalty, I actually have no clue what they're going to say. Yeah. Because it could spit out any interpretation. It's deteriorated so much that it has no meaning anymore. And so this what it has to do whenever I think about people arguing when it comes to political things or whatever it is. Like you have an argument and say that this thing is a principled thing. This is a principled position I have. But then when you're given a scenario like there's a fire in a room, and I can't think of a good example. Like I don't, you know. Maybe the whole life was sacred was the example, but I don't know. Maybe you can help me think of a good example. But you can think of someone like, for instance, all right, here's a good example, and I'm just going to use this because it's the best one I can think of. Think about the filibuster in the United States.
Okay.
And one thing that I've noticed about when you're paying attention to American politics, whether or not the filibuster is an evil thing or whether or not
it changes
it's the saving grace of the morning,
who likes it and who don't like it.
It changes who's in power every time.
It changes for who it works for versus who it don't work for. It's like, does it work for us this time? We love it. Does it not work for us this time? We hate it.
Yes. And so it's one of these things where the fire in the room is the filibuster. Yeah. Okay, is this a good thing? Yeah. And the fact that like you say, oh, the filibuster is one of my principles, that this thing is the thing that protects the minority voice so that from the tyranny of the majority, and so it needs to be left there, and that's a principle of yours. But then it's like, oh, but now your party is in power. What should we do with the filibuster? Oh, now we should get rid of it. It's like, oh, okay, so this isn't a principled position because this is a fire in a room, and your interpretation seems to produce, or your worldview or ethical machine produces a different interpretation
every time.
Yeah. So you're just a hypocrite. Yeah. And this is what it means to then look at someone's ethical language and look at how often they're a hypocrite and like, oh yeah, their ethical language is actually just it's not an algebraic structure. It produces noise. This is not I can't predict anything about this person's spirit and how they'll interpret this based off of this ethical language in quotes that they have.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying before, where you always have to be able to find your way back. And I try to do that whenever people try to sell me on an idea. Is I take in your idea and I try to, follow your progression of how you got there. And I want you to walk me all the way back. If you can't do that, you've just taken me to La La Land and I'm stuck there now. And I'm where do we go from here now? I was talking to someone about this recently, and her argument was to say that, if you pray hard enough, you could just, get money. And this is a popular belief that a lot of, Christians, I should say, have in Nigeria. To where if you pray hard enough, money could show up in your bank account.
Okay.
And so
I'm trying not to laugh, man.
It seems bizarre, right? So I was trying to point this out to the person. I'm like, okay, so I'm assuming now that money came from somewhere, because I'm sure if you go into your bank account, it's not going to be just money. There's going to be a spot where the money came from and how it entered you. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that you could pray hard enough and someone somewhere just like, you know what, I'm just going to put 10 grand in this person's account. You also have to agree that someone out there could pray hard enough and you will take 10 grand out of your account and go give it to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to see it both ways. Like, you could believe that you could just chill at home and then someone pays 10 grand into your account. But you also have to know that when someone out there prays, there's a possibility that you could go in your account, take 10 grand and send it to someone else. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Because if you believe one, you have to believe the other.
Yeah.
If you believe someone random puts money in your account because they prayed, you have to believe that when someone else is praised, you can go put money in someone else's account.
Yeah. So that's actually interesting. So because you're saying that you're not just saying that they say they can pray hard enough, then money magically appears. It just shows up there. They're saying something more specific. They're saying that if I pray, then a random person may put money into my account like this. Yeah. And so if that's the case, then it has to be the case that you could be the random person that put money in someone's account.
If you're not willing to agree with that, then we can't have a conversation. Period.
Yeah.
It is just that simple. It is literally that simple.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
And a lot of times when people talk about prayer influencing people's decision making, I always want to point out, okay, you do know that someone could be praying somewhere to influence your decision as well. If you can agree to that, then I'll go along with the story you're telling yourself. But of course they don't.
Yeah. Because at this case, you're like, okay, you at least have a consistent model now. You're saying this is how reality works. This is your model because it's not producing contradictions now. Because so this is man, that's why I'm talking to you, man. This is a perfect example. So now you have a consistent model at least.
At least
now
I will go with that all day long.
Now we have to go make predictions with it.
Yes.
Let's see if this thing actually works now. How do we pose an experiment to confirm or not confirm that this works? That's the second step to creating objective truth on how reality works. If you don't have the second, like having a logically sound, like if you don't even get past the first step of having a logically sound model, then I'm already done.
I'm done.
I'm already done.
That's where we need to start the conversation from. Are you telling me that someone puts money in your account? If you pray, that's fine. But you do know someone could pray somewhere. You could just go to your bank for no reason and just transfer money to this random person, because that is literally the world you are living in.
Yeah. And it's funny because, in this example, you're saying that you've presented an argument. This is a consequence of that argument. Like this has to also be true if this is true. It has to be. And so, if someone's not willing to even accept that, then it's like, oh, well, I don't have to listen to what you're saying after this. You have a logically inconsistent model. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Basically, they've given you a model of something. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you say that you're a believer of this concept that your prayers can influence random people, you're saying you're a believer in that, then I have to be able to make the prediction that if I ask you then that you can believe that someone can get you to put random money in someone else's account, I have to be able to make the prediction that you're going to say yes.
Yes.
And if I can't use your own model to make a prediction about what you think, then your model doesn't have any predictive power. Like, I can't even predict that you'll say yes to this. Yeah. And so this is just a broken system. It doesn't make any sense.
And at that point, I just shut down because I'm like, you know what? No. If we can't get through this point of the conversation to where we agree on the reality which we're trying to get me to live in. And this is what we say about movies and TV shows a lot is when you're trying to immerse me in a certain idea of a reality, you could do something that could just completely take me out of it. That is not consistent. You have to build a consistent reality that I can find my way back every time. Yes.
And this man, so go back to when X then Y because of Z. And listen to that episode. And the whole point is like causal structure, like the consistent causal structure of what makes a good story. And what we were saying before was that if you have a movie where every single scene in the movie, like every 10-second clip of a movie. So it's a movie made up of a collection of 10-second clips for 2 hours. It's a 2-hour collection of 10-second clips. And if each clip is chosen at random from a random movie, you just take a random 10-second clip from a random movie, then you just insert that thing is complete random noise. Each 10-second interval are completely uncorrelated to each other. There's no consistent structure.
You can't find your way back.
You can't make your way through anything. There's literally no structure. It's just random noise. And this is what it comes to whenever someone's trying to look at their ethical principles, like what it means to be principled. It is to have a set of principles that aren't conflicting and creating contradictions with each other all the time. And if all of your principles and ideas and language just produces contradictions nonstop, you have no ability to model anything or to create truth. You just have a random noise generator.
It's a random noise generator. I love that. That's what it is. But and I think it was an interesting conversation I had to where I try to point out that, you have to accept both sides of it. You can't sit on one side and just think that if you agree that, you could say a prayer here and influence someone else's decision, you also have to admit that someone else can pray somewhere and influence your decision. You have to give up that power too. And if you're not willing to do that, we can't talk to each other.
Yeah. So, but what was it? So let me go back to some of the things that we wanted to talk about. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was this whole idea of going back to the surfaces of ignorance. And when I originally wrote that paper, I actually called it The Surface of Ignorance in the Space of Speculation. And one of my co-authors didn't like me using the word speculation, so I got rid of it. But I still think that's what it is. It's the surface of ignorance in the space of speculation. And the reason why it's a space of speculation is, as we were saying in the previous episode, the surface of ignorance arises from there being a lack of information. So as long as there's some missing information, then it's like again, we have a language that assume that it's a language that has the ability to create meaning, so it can actually point from one concept to another concept. And so now that you're pointing at this concept, the amount of information determines how hard you're pointing, i.e. it determines how many things are consistent and how many things aren't consistent. The more information you give, the boundary of the things that are consistent gets smaller because you're giving more information. And so the surface of ignorance gets smaller in size, and that's what we show in the paper. And so when you actually examine this thing, and this is actually one thing I wanted to mention, is that this surface of ignorance, you have to imagine that when I first feed the data to point somewhere so that I create a boundary, you have to imagine that as looking at it from a macro point of view. So you have to imagine that on that scale, when it's pointing, from where I'm looking, it looks like a point. And then with the surface of ignorance, that's zooming in. It's like taking a microscope and going, okay.
It's like on your Google Maps when you zoom in.
Yes. When I go very far away, that it looks like a point, but then when I get a microscope and I look at it closer, I see that it's not a it's not a point. It's actually like a geometry. It's a manifold, and so that's what the surface of ignorance is. So I zoom in, I look at the surface of ignorance, and what was I going on about this for? I zoom in, look at the surface of ignorance.
And basically, the more information you get, the more you can see when you zoom in.
Yeah, the space of speculation. It's about speculating. Yeah, damn, I went off on a tangent. But damn, what the hell was I talking about?
You were talking about. I feel like you were going to talk about the simulation hypothesis.
Yeah, I was. You
were talking about the. I don't know, data points and the boundaries it includes and excludes and all that.
Yeah, so there's the boundary of what's included, the thing of what's not, of what's excluded. The things that's excluded, but the things that are included within the boundary, those are all the things that are symmetric with the information that's been provided to point in a specific direction. And so there isn't enough data to say it's one thing or another. And so this, to me, kind of captures the whole discussion about whether or not we're in a simulation. And I'm not talking about a simulation in general, because we came to the conclusion that we are in simulation, but it's not in the same sense that other people, when they're talking about simulation theory, they're saying that there's been some ancestral program of some higher beings that created a simulation, and we're just like the thing living in their simulation. And when people are trying to argue about the efficacy of that idea, whether or not it's true, they are basically left speculating.
Yeah, they're in the realm of speculation at that point.
They're basically looking at, given the constraint data of what we know about reality, this is a possible thing, but there is no information to say it's one thing or another. And so you are literally just speculating forever. Like this is a waste of time. Like, I really do find it to be a complete waste of time, because what you should be asking yourself is, what data could I gather to reduce the surface of ignorance so I can determine if it's pointing at one point on that surface versus another point? Is it pointing at a simulation? Are we all brains in a vat? Which version of this is the likely version? And if you can't come up with any experiment to say one way or another, you're just speculating. It's just, I don't know, it's just a waste of time.
It is a waste. I mean, we covered this in the simulation hypothesis episode, but it really is a waste. I mean, it's great, cocktail banter, I guess, but
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
I think too many people are taking it too seriously.
Yeah,
I think too many people waste too much time thinking about it.
Too many people, give it a lot of credit too, because I still see well-meaning scientists go into this long, deep, winding conversations about it, and it's like, it's a waste of time. We're just speculating.
And when we were talking about it back then, I was still in the middle of the research that ended up being this paper. This is exactly what I was thinking about. I was thinking, oh, they are on a surface of ignorance in the space of speculation, wasting their time forever.
Yeah, just rolling around in there.
Just rolling around in there. And actually, what I've found in a lot of discussions I've had with people who are like philosophers and stuff, is I feel like, and anyone can correct me on this because I'm not a philosopher. I do not have an exhaustive understanding of the literature and what they actually think. All I can say is whenever I have any detailed conversations with people who study philosophy, they seem to never be able to, they always seem to be confused by this. And it's the boundary of knowledge, like the boundary of what you know. And what I'm trying to say is that the surface of ignorance is beyond the boundary. Like the constraint data is the boundary, and then the surface of ignorance is beyond the boundary. That's like the wilderness.
Yeah,
that's the wilderness out there.
That we don't go into because we don't know what's in there. We could speculate all day long what's in there, but we just don't know.
And one way I view my job, like my job as a theoretical physicist, and this is the reason why I got into it. Like this is literally the reason why I wanted to become a theoretical physicist. I wanted to go to the boundary of human knowledge and explore there. I wanted to go to the boundary of human knowledge and explore there, and I knew that two paradigms of reality that seem to be some of the most not well understood or most confusing are general relativity and quantum physics. Like I literally remember when I was in undergrad, I told myself I wanted to do general relativity or quantum mechanics simply because it seemed like the most mysterious thing that people don't have a full grasp on, and I want to go there to explore what reality is. That was literally my motivator. And so going to the boundary of knowledge and trying to explore past the boundary, the first thing you have to be able to do is understand the boundary. Because the whole point is that when I have the constraint data, this is the humanity's understanding of the physical world to this point. That is my knowledge of physics. So my knowledge of physics is me going to what humanity has produced on the idea of the physical, what is developed, what its theories are, taking in all of that data so that I can have that model stored in my system so that I can produce the constraints. So now once that I have the constraints, I have the constraint data, I now can look at, okay, how much information is there and how much is missing. Now that I have the constraints, I can produce the boundary. And the whole point is that if I'm trying to go into the wilderness, if I can produce a surface of ignorance, this geometry, which is all the things that are consistent with the constraint data, then when I go into the wilderness, I can at least see the structure I'm walking in. It's the surface of ignorance. And I'm going through there because the thing is if something isn't on the surface of ignorance, so it is not a point on the surface of ignorance, it does not exist on that manifold, and I'm trying to say, oh, it's something, like here's the constraint data, here are all the possibilities, and then I say, I think it's something here that's not on the constraint data, that is logically not sound. That thing does not follow from the data. If it's not on the surface of ignorance, if it's not on the manifold, which is the surface of ignorance of all the possibilities, then it does not logically follow from the constraint data.
I agree.
And so when we're talking about following the symmetries and not walking off the cliff, when you go explore in this space of ignorance and lack of understanding, when you go explore there, you first have to be able to say what logically follows. And if you can't even construct what logically follows, you have no business going in there.
Yep. And even if you do, you can't bring any knowledge out of there.
Yeah.
Even if you end up in there, you're not bringing any knowledge out of there. You know?
Yeah, because you don't know what logically follows from the constraints, and this is the work. Like the work, as we've been saying, is to I want to go into a space. Like another way I conceptualize what I do. And this is something that, like, when you're doing this work, you start off in high school and think, I'm going to become a physicist. You don't know what you're doing. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And then you spend this time studying and learning and studying and learning until suddenly you start thinking things like, I am now working in the space of algebra. What are the rules of algebra? Oh, I am now working in the space of Fourier series. What are the rules of Fourier series? Oh, I am now working in quantum mechanics. Oh, I am now working in every one of these different realms, statistical mechanics. Every one of these different realms is a different reality. It has constraints and it has rules. Those constraints or rules is the information that has been developed by humanity. And so I have to be able to go in and be like, okay, I'm in this world now. Now I'm in this world. Now I'm in this world. And then when I'm trying to expand the knowledge of that world, I have to go and say, okay, how do the rules of this world work? What's the algebraic structure of this world? And then when I go exploring, I have to be able to use my understanding of the rules to be able to make sure that I'm making a step on the surface. I'm going from I'm following the symmetries.
I think it's the same thing I have to do at my job. Sometime last week, I had to work on a billboard for a client out in Oregon somewhere.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear that. Your art's on billboards now? That's cool.
Oh, yeah. It was like, it's an ISP company out there. And one of the things about when you try to design something that big is because my computer screen is, 15 inches?
Yeah.
And I want to design something that's going to live on a giant 22 feet board or however big it is,
Yeah.
So there's constraints to what I can or cannot do.
Yeah.
So initially when I get a product like that, I would usually ask the client to send me the, what's it called? There's a sheet that you can get from whoever's going to print that document for you. And it kind of tells you the scale that they use and they give you a document with the constraints for what you're trying to create.
Yes.
So they're like, okay, here you go. You want to live in billboard land? Oh, that's great. Here are the constraints for billboard land here. So they hand me those constraints and then I get them and I have to work within those constraints. One of the things that struck me, the last one I worked on was, I remembered growing up in college when we started learning algebra. And we'll say stuff like, oh, find X, find Y. Where am I going to ever use this thing? Blah, blah. I literally have to do that to figure out how I can make this 22 feet document on my 14-inch computer.
Yes. Because you have to go, all right, I make this manipulation, I make this manipulation. Okay, now here are the constraints. Does it follow the constraints? And then you run what you've created? No, it doesn't follow the constraints. Start again. All right, where did it fail? Oh, this is where it failed. This is my life. This is, like, literally, this is my job. Like, I was talking to Eunice about this yesterday. And, as I said in the past, I am like an applied mathematician. And that's essentially what I am. I'm an applied mathematician. That means that for me to do anything, I go to the world of mathematics. And there are these people who do theorems and proofs and say this tool, this mathematical structure works this way. It should do this. If you run it this way, this is what it should do. And so when I'm trying to model a physical system, I go to the space of mathematics and I basically gather tools and I gather materials and I go, okay, there's an instruction manual that comes with this. This is how these tools work. This is how you have to put them together to make a machine. Then I go, okay, this algebraic structure works this way. This matrix maps to here. The Fourier series works this way. And every single time, they always give you what will happen. Like, if I plug in these numbers, this is what you should get out. And so when I'm trying to make sure I'm using the tool properly, I always sit and do little experiments. And I'm like, okay, do I understand how to use this tool? Let me go ahead and try to make up a little a game and see if I can predict the outcome of the game using this tool. I don't predict the outcome, I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. Therefore, I'm not using the tool properly. And then I just keep doing that until I can consistently predict what will happen. And then I go, all right, I know how to use this tool. Then I take the other tool and it says, oh, these tools, they stick together this way. You kind of, this is the symmetry between these two tools and you connect them this way. And then I see, does that work? And this is just all I'm doing. Like, I'm literally just building little devices, and then I go to the end, I feed it some data, I turn the crank, I look at the output, and I'm like, oh, these surfaces of ignorance, they work the way that said it's supposed to work.
Yep. And it's the same thing, because even when you have to design something that big, when you're done, you have to look at it, because how it translates is whatever I create on my computer, it has to match to a certain scale that they're going to print it at.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure that I am converting whatever it is their size to something on my computer. So when they blow it up, it maps. So is it 1-to-1? Is it 1 inch to? Is it one? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The constraint that they you want to play in Billboard land? Oh, say no more. Here's the constraint data. Yeah. You need whatever you're going to design. You need to follow this constraints. You can't just design whatever you want. It's not going to work here. And then I follow those constraints, create the art, and then I check it out, and I hand it over to them, knowing fully well that I did the math, I made sure my scale is right. When I hand them that document, when they hit print, it should print out at the size they want based off of the scale that on the constraints that I had in the first place.
Yes, and so this is what it comes down to. Like we were talking, like in conspiracies and false trophies. And when we were talking in there, I was saying that like I live in the world of math. Like I to play the game of math, I have to render the reality that I'm in as I'm going, so that I can make steps in this space. And so in conspiracies and false trophies, imagine that I say I want to play the game of creating knowledge in the space of physics and mathematics. Say that's the game I want to play. And say that I have not taken the time to build the language of mathematics and physics so that I can actually use my understanding of the language to create models and to actually construct the constraints of that space. Now, say I never did that. And then say that I want to explore string theory or something like that. And you're sitting, you're speculating, the reality could be this. Oh, it could be that. And there are no constraints. You don't actually know the constraints of that space. You have full freedom to just come up with anything. You have no idea whether it's consistent with the constraints. And so you're just in the space of speculation with no walls to constrain where you go in this space. And then you're drawing these conclusions and you're saying that it's reality. And you are just fooling yourself. This is a delusion you've created about what you're actually doing.
At that point. You are rolling around in the sand. That's what you're doing.
You're not, like, to be able to speculate meaningfully, you need to actually be able to understand the constraints of the space that you're trying to navigate. If you haven't done that, you're not doing any work.
I can't imagine. It's almost like someone walking up to me and saying, make me a logo. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm just in this wild west now. You just want me to make you a logo. Where are the constraints on this? Someone said something the other day. They said creativity thrives in constraints.
Yeah, we said that last episode.
And so for me, the more, and those constraints is almost like information. So the more constraints,
it is.
Yeah, it is. So the more constraints, aka information about their business, I can gather from this client, the more I can create, the better I can create.
And in this example, when you say make a logo, you're not saying that they have a logo in mind with some constraints and they just haven't told you what it is. You're saying that they walk up to you and say, make a logo. They don't actually care what you produce. There's no target. There's no target. You could literally just make a straight line on a piece of paper and hand it to them. They're like, that's a logo. Because they didn't say, I have a secret logo I want to make and I want to see if you can guess what it is. It's not like you have a target. It's literally just make a logo.
Yeah. And that's how I see people like that. It's like you're just in this world of speculation, speculating on string theory all day long. It's like, that's not how none of this works.
Yeah, because what you're saying is that in that make a logo example, literally, if I just make a circle and a line or something like that, I can make any. There's no constraints. Like it doesn't it doesn't require anything.
There's no meaning, nothing.
Yes. Yeah. And so this is like to be able to navigate a space. You need to know the constraints.
Constraints drive creativity. It drives, what's the word now? It provides you with, it serves as some sort of like guide while you navigate the space you're in.
The thing is we can speak and it may sound hyperbolic, and I haven't thought this through. So this is just inspired from this conversation. So it's not a fully fleshed out idea, but I don't think that there's anything that exists that is not describable in terms of constraints.
Yeah.
Because if there's no constraints in the universe,
there's no meaning.
So that, if there's no constraints, there's no structure. And so there's no structure, there's no information. A universe in which there is absolutely no constraints or anything, and it's all just random noise, that is the heat death of the universe. When people talk about the heat death of the universe, that's what that is. It's a completely homogeneous space where it's like, think of being in a realm of static noise. And then imagine saying that I'm at one point in the space of static noise, and then I'm at another point in the space of static noise. But if you move from one point in the space of static noise to another point in the space of static noise, then you can't actually distinguish the first point from the second point. There's nothing to distinguish it because it's all random. That's not a space. There's nothing there.
The constraints is what the constraint data is what differentiates gray from black. There's only so much that falls into gray, and then at some point it becomes black.
It's the thing that separates something from nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
It's constraints
It's
and
constraints
information.
all the way down.
Yes, it's information all the way down. Constraint is the thing that separates something from nothing. I feel like
every week we say it's something new all the way down.
That's the whole point. It's actually funny. So funny you bring that up. So I started talking to Reasonable Fideus again. So
okay.
he was working on his thesis, and so he was in the cave like toiling away, and so his entire reality was that thesis for a while. And so man, I love talking to this dude. And so he finally finished his thesis, and I was able to talk to him yesterday. And when I first started talking with him, we first started communicating, actually just before we had our first live conversation, and I was trying to explain to him the bottom turtle concept. He jokingly said it's bottom turtles all the way across. And I was like, that's brilliant. And he was like, I was just joking. I was like, no, I got to tell Oyani this. It's bottom turtles all the way across. And the whole point is that in this infinite regression problem, it's never just one thing. But when you look at the constraint data of like causal structure, and you're looking at, as an information processor, how are all the ways that I can conceptualize causal structure, input from output, X goes to Y because of Z. You look at all the ways, and you can look at it in terms of literature. You can look at it in terms of like, it's all literature all the way down. It's all, all the things that we say
really
all the way down.
Constraints all the way down, bro.
What I'm saying is like, these are all like bottom turtle perspectives.
Yeah.
Because they have this process of reading and writing, taking in data, creating an interpretation, and outputting data. And so you're looking at all the ways to interpret reality from the perspective of the spirit of the information processor. Yeah. And as long as it has some sort of valid process of input, output, and then an explanation or the explanation of the mapping from input to output, you can think of that all as story. Yeah. That's what stories are. They have an input. All the way down. They have stories all the way down.
I love it.
This is what we're saying. This is why it's the bottom turtle. But I like what Reasonable Fideus said. It's bottom turtles all the way across.
Yeah. There's just no way to avoid it now.
Yeah, but you need to be able to build a relationship between all the bottom turtles, and then that thing that builds the relationship between all of them is the algebraic structure between all like sound interpretations of reality.
Yeah.
From the perspective of an information processor. So use information processor as like the constraint spirit. It's the constraint data. And then think of all of the ways of conceptualizing reality from the perspective of an information processor.
Yep. It's
and the relationships between them, and that's the algebraic structure between them. Yeah.
I think we can kick it here.
Probably cut it off there. Yeah, actually, so I wanted to shout out, and let me see if I can look at this person's yeah, so one morning I woke up. So, I when I wake up in the morning, I allow myself 5 minutes to look at my phone. So, it's probably not the healthy thing to do, but I look at my phone when I wake up. I check stuff. But literally, I don't spend an hour sitting in my bed. I have 5 minutes because I have stuff I need to do. And so I looked up on the Reddit page, and the first thing I saw in the morning, I woke up one day, is this guy named Reynaldinho. They made a comment on the post of the last episode. It's Algebra All the Way Down. It said, "I just want to say, great episode. Thanks for making these. You are appreciated." Yeah. That's what I woke up to.
Oh yeah. That must be a good thing. Yeah.
That shit just made my day.
I was like, oh shit, this is good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
a random person out there in the world.
It meant a lot. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, every once in a while, like very rarely, I'll get like that time we got that email from Christopher saying like, I really appreciate the show. And when we actually talked about some of the stuff that he brought up, we talked about MC Owens and the Blue Buddha. He sent me a message that that day was like, man, I was listening to your episode and you brought this up, and I was smiling from ear to ear the entire time, and it just really made my day. Like, man, that stuff really, I really appreciate that.
It resonates, man. Yeah, it does. It does.
And I want. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I wanted to say that with Christopher suggesting that I look at MC Owens and the Blue Buddha, I just want to say thank you for that, because I listen to his podcast. I don't listen to it like all the episodes, but every once in a while I'll just sit and listen to it. And he actually had an episode recently that was really that actually was really impactful. Let me see if I can find the name of it, because I would suggest that people go and listen to it. It's a really good episode.
Okay. You gotta send me this stuff.
Phone. It's oh yeah, I can't even pronounce this. The Baya Brava Sutra.
Just butchering that, guys.
Definitely. But it's Fear and Dread. I would definitely suggest people listen to this this Fear and Dread thing. And I want to say that with Christopher, him taking the time to send me that email and suggest this guy, he brought that into reality.
Yeah.
He brought that into reality by sending me that email, and he changed how I move through the world and what I'm exposed to. And now I follow Blue Buddha, MC Owens on Instagram, and he'll post things. I ask him
questions and stuff. Yeah, I see that all the time too. Yeah, I'm
learning more about Buddhism from this guy, and it's changing my worldview. It's changing my perspective. It's enriching my life. And this was because someone sent me an email and was just like, hey, I'm a listener of your show. And that's what I want. I want the listeners of this show to create a dialogue, not only with us, but with each other, because we have people who listen to the show all over the world. Like, we don't have like the biggest following of people who listen to it, but we have people everywhere. We have people in Canada, we have people in the UK, Austria, Japan, Brazil, and Nigeria. Like, we have people all over the world that listen to this show. And if you send in your information and you send in comments and ideas, then you can start to expose the people who listen to this show to your ideas, and we can have a dialogue going on between us about how we conceptualize reality. And I want to know how this show affects how you conceptualize reality.
Because I wonder how many people are going to go check out that podcast you just mentioned now.
Yeah.
Simply off of you saying it, and now that is in their reality now. So it's and I think that that's the beauty of, communication, and we just need to leverage that more to get our ideas to, spread around the world.
Yeah. And I want to be affected by your ideas, and of course with this podcast, we want you guys to sincerely consume our art,
consume it, engage
interact with it.
If you agree or disagree, let us know. And I'm open to changing my mind. And
absolutely,
that's the whole point.
Yeah, man.
So,
but you want to go?
But like always, guys, we appreciate you. We appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to listen to us go on and on about these topics. If you do want to show us some love, send a comment or just tell us what you think about the episode. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Bottom Turtle Podcast. We also have a Reddit page, The Bottom Turtle. And you can just hit us up, send us a message, and let us know what you think about the episodes, topics you want us to talk about. Anything is pretty much fair game, because we are hoping that we've built this universe where we can, fluidly interpret some of these popular concepts with information theory and kind of create a more accessible language that's free from bias, I should say.
So that we could all live in the same reality with a logically sound language that creates high precision meaning, so that we can high precision meaning, so that we can share our truth as sincerely as possible, so that we can all move toward a better model of reality, to move closer to the truth, using everyone's shared data and shared experience to create the God model.
Yeah.
And we want people to, share their data sincerely, but I want to hear them as clearly as possible. And like we've been saying, in this language, all of our concepts and ideas, we're trying to tie it to how the universe evolves, the structure of the universe, the nature of the universe, the state of the universe, with true data.
And I think the more we start to do this and have these conversations, I think things will get more interesting. But like always, guys, we'll talk to you guys next week. Stay turtling, my friends.
All right, everyone. Peace.